Hey YouTube, what's up? Welcome back to part 2 of a 2-part series where I first hire people on Upwork to make maps for the game that I'm building and then implement those maps in my game. So in my last video, I showed you 2 different maps from 2 different artists and I asked you which one you thought was better. Overwhelmingly, it seemed like the response was that the second one was the better of these 2 options, which was great because for me, that also meant that I was getting the much cheaper contractor. So now that I picked the second option, how do I take that map and get it into my game? It's as simple as dragging and dropping the file over, right? Unfortunately, not so much. When I initially tried to just load the map into my game, I realized that none of the collisions were set up for the tiles, which meant that my character could just walk around through walls and any other part of the level, even where they weren't supposed to be. With that in mind, setting up collisions for this map has been the main thing that I've been working on recently, but that turned into a lot more work than I originally intended because I wanted to implement collisions correctly this time. I guess it wasn't incorrect the way that I did it the first time, but in my original map, my plan was to embed properties into each of the tiles, and whenever I painted with those tiles in Tiled, they would automatically have the collisions in them. But with the new map, the map had already been built and I could then go into each tile set and manually add the property to all of the tiles, but I couldn't be sure that all of the collisions were happening exactly the way that I wanted. And in general, I think it's a much better workflow to use something called a collision layer. So taking a look at the documentation for Grid Engine, which is the engine that I'm using to power my Phaser.js game, they have a section here on collision layers. And they even provide an example tile set that I used to build a collision layer in my game. So basically what you're gonna do is pull in this image to something like Tiled, and you're gonna build your own custom tile set. Now, you can see here in the example image that they have, this is a flawed tile set because the one that they've got hovered over right here is a duplicate of one they've got down here in the bottom left-hand corner. So what I did was I grabbed that tile and I rotated it to be the correct way. And they're also missing one example of these 3 bordered tile set. They have a right and an up, and I believe they also have a down. Or no, they were missing down and left, and I added those 2. I think that's what happened. So basically, I had to take this image, I edited this image so that it would support my needs in my project, and then I got to work. I set my opacity to 50, as they talk about here in the docs, and then I basically went through and painted collisions all over my map. So this is the map that I chose, the second one that you guys helped me choose. Thank you. Even after building that collision layer, I was running into a lot of problems. So I made a couple small code changes that I want to share. Here on line 285, I added a for each loop, and I'm only adding the tile set image to my map if the name isn't collisions, which is where I was painting my collision layer, so that we don't generate an error in the console every single time we try to load a map. And then here on line 293, when I'm mapping over the layers of that map, I updated the create layer function to take in an array of keys instead of a single key. Before, I was toggling which key I was feeding into this function so that it matched the key of the map that I was loading into memory for my game, but I realized that I can pass in an array of keys and then I don't need to deal with which key is associated with which map in tile. Next, I realized that none of my bushes were destructible anymore, as I've shown in a previous video, and that was because they weren't on a layer called bushes in Tiled. They were previously on one of these decoration layers. So I moved all of my bushes into their own layer, and that way in my code I can just grab all of the tiles on that layer and turn them into sprites in my game so that they can be destroyed. Lastly, in Tiled, I created this layer called transportation, and I added some game objects onto this layer that'll allow my player to jump between the house and this map scene that you can see here. And then I also added an ability to move to my old test map where I had those monsters running around, and that's down here in the lower left hand corner. But I needed this layer to be named transportation because I was specifically referencing that key in my code when I was creating the interactive areas that would trigger a change in maps between those two locations. Okay, after several days of tweaking small stuff, I'm finally comfortable with the progress I've made so far, and I'm really happy with how the map looks now that it's finally loaded in game. The experience feels a lot more lush, and it really feels like you're in a forest here with the player. I'm happy that the bushes are once again destructible, and it feels nice to be able to walk around the map and explore now that we've got collisions working. There's still some small things that I'd like to add. I'd really like to see the water move a bit. I know that there is a way to animate these tiles where the lilies are floating in the pond, and towards the beginning there was some waterfall tiles, and I would love to have those animated so it looks like the water is flowing, and maybe we could even add some trees drifting in the wind a bit. After months of staring at a test map, it's really refreshing to see a more vibrant environment that my character can walk around in. It's starting to feel like my game is actually making progress, and I might finish it one day. If you happen to watch this video to the end, thanks so much for following along on this journey week by week as I try to build out this game. Sometimes it really feels like a never-ending list of stuff to do, but more work means more videos, and I'll continue to try to make them as entertaining and informative as possible. So thank you again for following along. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.